The year is 1947. The world is still reeling from World War II. Millions of Jewish survivors are displaced, desperate for a safe haven. All eyes turn to the newly formed United Nations to decide the fate of Palestine. The UN votes to partition Palestine, met with mixed reactions. For Jewish people, it's a promise of a homeland after centuries of persecution. For many Arabs in Palestine, it feels like an injustice. This decision sets in motion a chain of events that shape the Middle East to this day. But what if it never happened? Let's step into an alternate reality. Post-World War II, tensions are high in Palestine. The British mandate is crumbling, Jewish immigration is increasing, fueling Arab anxieties. Both sides lay claim to the land with deeply rooted historical and religious connections. Without the UN partition plan, the British withdrawal from Palestine becomes even more perilous. The stage is set for a chaotic power vacuum. Britain, weary from war, prepares to relinquish control of Palestine. Without a UN plan, chaos looms. Jewish and Arab communities brace for an uncertain future. Paramilitary groups on both sides are mobilizing, ready to fight for their claims. The world watches nervously, fearing another conflict in the volatile Middle East. The fate of Palestine hangs in the balance, a tinderbox ready to ignite. As the last British troops withdraw, violence engulfs the region. The absence of a UN-backed partition plan removes any semblance of order. Jewish militias clash with Arab forces, escalating into a full-blown civil war. Jerusalem witnesses some of the fiercest fighting. Neighboring Arab states intervene militarily, sensing an opportunity. The conflict threatens to engulf the entire region in a wider war. Amidst the violence, a humanitarian catastrophe unfolds. Hundreds of thousands of Palestinians are displaced from their homes. Refugee camps overflow with families fleeing the fighting. Holocaust survivors seeking refuge in Palestine remain stranded in Europe. International aid organizations struggle to cope with the scale of the crisis. The outbreak of violence sends shockwaves through the international community. The United Nations faces criticism for its failure to find a lasting solution. The Soviet Union aligns with the Arab cause, condemning Western imperialism. The United States struggles to formulate a coherent policy response. The lack of a unified international response exacerbates the situation on the ground. Without the partition plan, the conflict rapidly escalates. The violence spills across borders, drawing in neighboring Arab states. Egypt clashes with Jewish forces in the Sinai Peninsula. Syria sees an opportunity to expand its territory. The conflict becomes a tangled web of competing interests. As the conflict drags on, alliances shift and crumble. Old rivalries resurface as each country prioritizes its own interests. Egypt, under Nasser, emerges as a major power broker. Rivalries between Egypt and Jordan intensify. The Palestinian people see their aspirations for self-determination repeatedly sidelined. The conflict becomes a proxy war for the Cold War superpowers. The Soviet Union provides arms and support to Arab nations. The United States backs Israel, wary of Soviet encroachment. This influx of weapons fuels the conflict, leading to devastating wars. The region becomes a battleground for Cold War ideologies. For Jewish refugees, the absence of a UN partition plan shatters the dream of a safe haven. They remain stranded in displaced persons camps in Europe. The Zionist dream seems to slip away, fueling frustration and despair. Underground organizations facilitate clandestine immigration to Palestine. Holocaust survivors, fueled by hope, defy the odds to reach their ancestral homeland. The escalating conflict impacts Jewish communities throughout the Middle East. The rise of Arab nationalism creates a climate of fear and suspicion. Governments enact discriminatory laws restricting Jewish rights. The exodus turns into a flood as Jews flee their homes. Many seek refuge in the newly formed state of Israel. Without a central homeland, the Jewish diaspora faces an existential crisis. The dream of a return to Zion seems increasingly distant. Some embrace cosmopolitanism, integrating into their adopted countries. Others support the young state of Israel from afar. The struggle to reconcile the dream of a Jewish state with the realities of a scattered diaspora becomes a defining characteristic. The Soviet Union sees an opportunity to advance its interests in the Middle East. With no Israel as a Western ally, the Soviets intensify support for Arab nationalist movements. Egypt becomes a key recipient of Soviet aid. The Soviets exploit the plight of Palestinian refugees to fuel anti-Western sentiment. This narrative resonates with many in the Arab world, tilting the balance of power toward the Soviet camp. The absence of Israel intensifies rivalry between Arab states. Egypt, empowered by Soviet backing, clashes with other regional powers. The competition for control over vital resources exacerbates conflicts. Moscow exploits these divisions to increase its influence. The United States commits more resources to protect its interests, risking entanglement in regional conflicts. The ripple effects extend far beyond the Middle East, impacting the global balance of power. The Soviet Union adopts a more assertive foreign policy. The absence of Israel complicates efforts to contain Soviet expansionism. The United States faces criticism for its perceived inaction. The intensified Cold War rivalry disrupts global energy markets and diverts resources from other pressing global issues. The absence of Israel has significant ripple effects on technological advancement. Israel's expertise in drip irrigation and solar energy would be absent. The Middle East faces severe challenges in food production and water scarcity. The region remains heavily dependent on fossil fuels. The economic and environmental consequences are profound. The economic landscape of the Middle East is drastically different without Israel. The region remains heavily reliant on oil production and exports. This dependence hinders economic diversification efforts. The gap between oil-rich nations and those with fewer resources widens. The lack of opportunities for young people leads to brain drain, further hindering economic development. The absence of Israel would leave a profound void in the cultural tapestry of the Middle East. Israel, despite conflict, serves as a meeting point for diverse cultures, enriching the region's artistic, culinary, and intellectual life. Without Israel, this vibrant cultural fusion would be absent, leaving a more homogeneous and less dynamic cultural landscape. The loss of this cultural bridge would be felt globally, as Israel fosters cross-cultural dialogue through its art, music, and literature. In this alternate 1947, the UN's inability to agree on a partition plan leaves the Palestinian people in a precarious position. With no independent state of their own, their fate becomes intertwined with the ambitions of neighboring Arab nations. The dream of self-determination, already a distant hope under British rule, recedes further into the background. The Palestinian leadership, divided and lacking international recognition, struggles to assert its authority amidst the chaos and violence that engulf the region. Many Palestinians find themselves living as refugees, displaced from their homes by the fighting. Refugee camps, hastily erected and poorly supplied, become symbols of their plight, a constant reminder of their dispossession and the failure of the international community to find a just solution. The absence of a Palestinian state leaves a dangerous power vacuum, creating fertile ground for extremism and radicalization to take root. The sense of injustice, fueled by displacement and the lack of a clear path towards self-determination, becomes a potent force, shaping Palestinian identity for generations to come. As the conflict in Palestine rages on, neighboring Arab states seize control of parts of the territory. Jordan annexes the West Bank, incorporating its Palestinian population into its own kingdom. Egypt takes control of the Gaza Strip, administering it as a protectorate. These annexations, initially temporary, soon become entrenched realities. Palestinians under Arab rule find their aspirations for independence sidelined. Despite the lack of a state, Palestinian identity continues to evolve and solidify. Displacement and struggle forge a strong national consciousness among Palestinians. The diaspora plays a crucial role in preserving and promoting national identity. Intellectuals in exile raise awareness internationally, keeping the dream of a free Palestine alive. The absence of a state creates significant challenges for the national movement. Without unified territory or government, mobilizing effectively is difficult. The movement becomes fragmented, with factions vying for influence. Internal division, exploited by external actors, hinders the struggle for self-determination. Palestinians find themselves caught in geopolitical intrigue, their fate intertwined with more powerful actors' ambitions. As we step back from this alternate timeline, the weight of the what-if hangs heavy. The absence of the UN partition plan for Palestine in 1947 paints a starkly different picture of the Middle East. The region erupts into a conflagration, reshaping alliances and fueling proxy wars. Without Israel as a Western ally, the Soviet Union gains a stronger foothold. The Middle East faces economic stagnation and resource scarcity. Palestinians grapple with annexation and maintaining a unified national identity. This alternate history reminds us of the profound impact a single decision can have. The most poignant aspect of this alternate reality is the enduring question of what might have been. Would the Middle East have been a more or less peaceful place without the creation of Israel? Would the Palestinian people have achieved their aspirations for self-determination sooner or later? Would the world have been spared the decades of conflict and suffering that have come to define the Israeli-Palestinian conflict? These questions, impossible to answer definitively, highlight the complexities and enduring legacies of historical events. The absence of the UN partition plan would undoubtedly have led to a different set of challenges and conflicts, the outcomes of which are impossible to predict with certainty. One thing is clear: the issues that fueled the conflict, land, identity, security and self-determination, would have persisted, demanding resolution in one form or another. The human cost of this unresolved conflict, the lives lost, the futures shattered, serves as a tragic reminder of the importance of finding peaceful and just solutions to complex political disputes. The alternate timeline we have explored underscores the weight of choice in shaping the course of history. The decision to partition Palestine, while made with the best of intentions, had far-reaching and often unintended consequences. It serves as a cautionary tale about the complexities of international diplomacy and the need for thoughtful, nuanced approaches to resolving deeply rooted conflicts. As we reflect on this alternate history, we are reminded that the present is not predetermined. The future remains unwritten, shaped by the choices we make today. The lessons learned from the past, both the triumphs and the tragedies, can guide us towards a more peaceful and just world. The enduring challenge lies in finding the courage to learn from the mistakes of history, to embrace dialogue and compromise, and to work tirelessly towards a future where the rights and aspirations of all people are respected and upheld. The path to peace is rarely straightforward, but the pursuit of a world free from conflict and oppression remains a worthy and necessary endeavor.